Israel says Iran was behind an attack on one of its ships in the Gulf of Oman on Thursday night. Speaking to Israel's Kan TV channel on Saturday, Defense Minister Benny Gantz accusing Iran of specifically targeting Israeli infrastructure and citizens.
האיראנים מחפשים לפגוע בתשתיות ישראליות או באזרחים ישראלים, ובכלל בכל מה שקשור באיזשהו אופן למדינת ישראל. המיקום של הספינה בסמיכות יחסית לאיראן בשלב הזה, מביא את המחשבה שיש הערכה שמדובר באיראנים, אבל זה כאמור דבר שצריכים להמשיך לבדוק אותו. ישראל תמשיך לפעול בכל מקום.
The Israeli cargo ship known as Helios Ray was on its way to Singapore with a stopover in Dubai when it was struck by an explosion on Friday. Unsourced reports indicated that the blast may have been caused by missile fire from a ship. The attack causing slight damage and no injuries to crew members. Following that incident, the ship returned to Dubai for repairs. Now, according to a UN shipping database, the ship is owned by a Tel Aviv company called Ray Shipping. Now, let's speak with Avi Melamed, strategic intelligence analyst and Middle East expert, to break this down. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So Israel seems pretty confident that Iran is indeed responsible for this, but there's very little information available. What are the indications that Iran did indeed carry out this attack?
Well, as Minister Gantz says, first, the location very close to the Iranian bases in the area of the Hormuz Strait, and second, the method that was used. Apparently, it was done in a way that was very professional, aimed not to sink the ship, but to cause some damage and mostly to send a signal.
Israel and Iran, of course, are already involved in several proxy wars like Syria. Would you call this a dramatic escalation between Tehran and Jerusalem?
Yes, I would call it an escalation, even though, as you mentioned accurately, there is already precedent. I mean, it's not the first time Iran is actually directly attacking Israeli targets. I want to remind us that in 2018, Iran, for the first time, launched a direct military attack on Israel from Syria. And that, of course, on top of the whole proxy wars that Israel has been engaged with in the last 30 years, basically with Iranian proxies. So in that sense, yes, it's definitely an escalation.
Avi, there were also U.S. airstrikes in Syria over the weekend targeting Iranian militias, which we will be discussing later on the show. Could this be an indirect response to that?
Not to the best of my understanding. First, apparently the attack on the ship happened on the night before, a couple of hours before the attack on the Syrian-Iraqi border crossing. Second, I would more associate the U.S. attack on the Qaim border crossing with the attacks on U.S. facilities in Iraq that were conducted by Iranian-backed Iraqi Shiite militias. So I will not necessarily connect those two things together.
Is Israel going to have to up the security on its ships in this area after this incident?
I guess there will be different dimensions of the Israeli response. That would be probably one of the dimensions. But in the end of the day, we have to understand something very significant. What we see right now is a very severe escalation in the sense that the Iranian, up until now, has been taking the Middle East hostage. Now they are taking the world hostage. And this is something that the world has to take into its consideration. It's about time they will do that.
All right, Avi Melamed, thank you so much for your insight.
My pleasure.